Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam amotzi lechem min haaretz. Bonjour à cette formation multiculturelle pour l'Université de Breda. Je m'appelle Joseph Rouvens, and you were probably wondering why I was addressing you in French and first in Hebrew. Well, that's what I'll explain in my cross-cultural workshop. And I just want to show you, this is a picture I took in the neighborhood. And you notice here is like almost like a face in white, and here it's a face in black. So I thought that was a very nice cross-cultural black-white thingy. Anyways, this multiple intelligences model was developed by Howard Gardner at Harvard in the 1980s. And it's a model I've been using a lot, actually in all my classes, in culture, but also even in economics. Well, the essence of his theory, and you can find much more on the internet, is that humans have multiple intelligences. Now you may say, yeah, obvious. However, unfortunately, our society and our education has put most emphasis on the logical reasoning intelligence and on the linguistic intelligence. When I was in high school in the 1970s, and I don't think so much has changed, but most of the courses were math, Dutch language, French language, then the other languages, history, physics, etc. And most of the time was spent memorizing stuff. Sometimes, no, well, actually hardly ever your own originality, but it was mostly memorizing stuff, and exams were about reproducing that. The other intelligence, like a spatial intelligence, well, that's something you could develop outside of school in drawing school. Or musical, well, we had 1 hour of music at a specific time, 1 hour, so little. But anyways, Gardner's point is humans have very different intelligences, many intelligences, and it's important to activate all of them. Actually, to get most effective learning, you should activate all of these human intelligences. And so what I've done is my cross-cultural workshops always have elements of these intelligences in them. So let me start with musical. Well, I open my workshop with a song in Flemish. It's a way to introduce, culturally where I come from. And then also using the Hebrew and using the French. Then there's some logical reasoning, which means I do teach information, which could be something for about 15 minutes, a particular cross-cultural model like Hofstede that I would explain. But then there is also elements of the interpersonal. And the interpersonal can be asking students, well, let's get into stereotypes today. So what are some things that shocked you when you arrived in the Netherlands? So imagine this is addressed to the non-Dutch students. And a typical one could be the bicycles, or a typical one could be the Dutch are so direct. And so we have some interpersonal. where students also get to know more about each other. Now, at some point, that's enough, and then we may move to something bodily kinesthetic. On the final slide of my presentation is a picture of students doing something called leadership tango. That's a course I've developed now 10 years ago or even longer for BUAS and some other places in the world. And that's very much a physical way of learning, leading, and following. Now, in the cross-cultural workshop, I use some of those movements just to get people in their body and also to talk non-verbally, to experience each other non-verbally. And afterwards, going to the linguistic part, we can then again talk about our experiences, which also means coming to the intrapersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal is something we do a lot at BUAS with all the, like we have management development skills or getting to know yourself, all those, also use them in the workshop. How did you experience a particular comment? What did this do with you? How was it to be in a culture where people are more quiet than your own? So all these things or these intelligences are taken into account. The naturalist intelligence, not so much, although I may take a little plant to school, just to tell people in class, well, hey, there are also non-human beings in our environment, and let's invite them into our culture and classroom, and maybe see how other cultures react to that. We also sometimes do spatial exercises. Like, for example, I would stand closer to someone than would be comfortable to them, without mentioning it, but then asking them, how is this? And they may say, oh, this doesn't feel right. And then we kind of check with students, what is like an appropriate personal space? And we could then discuss things like, does it have to do with your culture? Like, for example, on average, Latin Americans stand closer to each other than, for example, the Dutch. And, for example, the Finns stand a bit further from each other, not much, than the Dutch. So you could get a very interesting interaction when you're approaching a Finnish person and they kind of back up. And you misattribute that as the fact that they're afraid of you, when actually it has to do with subtle aspects of culture. Now, the examples I'm giving here are very much my own, and I don't ask you to copy them. Actually, I don't want you to copy them. But what I want you to do is, while using this frame of intelligence, is to see how you can develop your own workshops, your own cross-cultural classes, and sort of take those different intelligences in account. And again, they're a very nice way. I mean, I like it as a framework because it helps me to structure my workshops so that I know, have enough variety. We all know, we've all been at meetings where after like 40 minutes or maybe even 20 minutes of a meeting, our head is completely full and we would rather do something else. Well, the same holds for students. So make sure you have different intelligences you can talk to, and also be very flexible with that. Like I do have a plan, of 10 minutes of lecture and then 10 minutes of interpersonal. I do have some sort of plan, but at the same time, I follow whatever occurs in the workshop. For example, if students come in and they had 5 hours of classes before me, well, then it wouldn't make sense that I would start with some bodily exercises. So I tell them about my Aikido, Qigong, Japanese teacher, and I tell them, okay, come on, let's do a few hitting the arms like they do in Aikido warm-up. And you know, I give a kind of a cross-cultural spin to it, but it puts students into a bodily awareness, and then afterwards you can work with them also with theory. Anyways, I hope this video and the Howard Gardner multiple intelligences model is useful for you. And you know, feel free to let me know how you do things, or invite me in your classroom. Thank you.